As the Money Burns is an original podcast by Nikki Woodard. Based on historical research, this is a deep exploration into what happened to a set of actual heirs and heiresses to some of America's most famous fortunes when the Great Depression hits. Each episode has 3 primary sections. Section 1 is a narrative story. Section 2 goes deeper into the historical facts. Section 3 focuses on contemporary, emotional, and personal connections. Story recap. While many seek love and marriage, Doris Duke, Evelyn Wash McLean, and Cobina Wright face threats to fortune and life. Now back to As the Money Burns. Iceberg and Torpedo. A big birthday arrives with a large inheritance and thus the ability to finally control one's life, or so it seems. Section 1. Story. When it comes to birthdays, many focus on blowing out candles, but for the uber wealthy, people in the press wonder how many millions might get blown. Oh, summer always comes with lots of possibilities, and for the elites, that means gathering in favorite spots. And anyone on the inside knows this is when engagements are made. More buzz escalates as several heirs and heiresses reach their majority and will be coming into sizable fortunes this year, making them even more attractive as potential mates. The biggest sport and activity is the mating game. Plenty of sub-debutante activities are planned, a pre-introduction of the year's newly eligible debutantes before their large winter debuts. Amongst this year's crop, with dances and teas planned, are the newest it girl, Alen Gillespie, the ever-popular Ellen Tuck French, aka Tucky, the attractive Betty Morris, and Mary de Mum, formerly of Paris. Out of the new crop of debutantes, one particular young lady gets a little more attention due to her colorful and somewhat scandalous family history. Tucky's own press mentions her rebellious father, Francis Ormond French, aka Frankie, brief stint as a taxi driver back in the 1920s, among other attempted professions. Tucky's family has the unfortunate moniker of the divorcing Frenches. For her father, his siblings, and other relatives, multiple divorces, since they are already born part of the elite set, in contrast to the ambitious social climbing of the Marion Wilsons, as in Grace Wilson Vanderbilt, and the Mdivanis, whose more illustrious marriages have included Louise Van Alen and now Barbara Hutton. After more recent security issues, everyone is ready to focus on fun, and thus this 1933 tennis week, which lasts well over a week, will be the gayest since 1929. Movie star handsome tennis sensation Frank Shields, along with his wife Rebecca Billie Tenney Shields, stays with babyface richest boy Huntington Hartford, his bright wife, Mary Lee Epling Hartford, and his smothering mother, Henrietta Hartford, at their Seaverge estate. Saturday, August 5th, 1933, Newport, Rhode Island. As tennis activities kick off, Eileen and her sister Phyllis Gillespie advance in girls' doubles after defeating Tucky's sister Virginia French and Rose Winslow, then on to finals playing against Betty Morris and Penelope Winslow. Earlier this week, on Tuesday, August 1st, 1933, sisters Betty and Lita Morris hosted a treasure hunt for 60 youths at their parents' cottage, Malbon. This weekend, the sisters win a sandcastle design for a Viking ship at Bailey's Beach. Among the judges, artist Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney. Other Newport activities include a special aviation exhibition. But the real contest for any debutante or sub-debutante is the coveted marital proposal. This year's biggest prize and dubbed most eligible bachelor is proud scion John Jacob Astor VI, aka Jakey, as he comes into his majority in fortune during the middle of this social season. A name and a fortune bring fierce competition. The marital-minded young ladies salivate over the possibility of a go at him. He has been spotted and photographed already lounging on the sandy beach while waiting for his official birthday. Both present and yet elusive, Jakey skipped the 1932 social season heading off on an extensive world tour after graduating from Newport's St. George's. Upon his return, he has currently opted not to immediately enroll in Harvard University as previously planned. Jakey has already been seemingly attached to Italian Princess Donna Cristina Torlonia and Lebrun Bruni Rhinelander. Alas, no official engagements have been set. Though many speculate Jakey will soon place a sparkler on Bruni's finger. Only Jakey has his own competition for her by the visiting British Viscount Duncannon, who also has been seen escorting Bruni along Thames Street. The Viscount is guest of Grace Wilson Vanderbilt and Brigadier General Cornelius Vanderbilt III, a.k.a. Neily, at their Beaulieu cottage. Monday, August 7, 1933, Bar Harbor, Maine. Breaking away from the prying eyes of Newport, several have gathered for an important document signing. Here, Jakey will finally come into his control of the estate, began long before his birth. A rather small pittance compared to his eldest half-brother, the stiff and rather sour Vincent Astor, and still a little less than a third of the amount given to their ethereal Bohemian sister, Alice Eva Muriel Astor Obolinski von Hofmannsthal. Their father, John Jacob Astor IV, a.k.a. Jack, was the richest man to die during the Titanic tragedy. Jack's second wife and Jakey's mother, Madeline Talmadge Force Astor, survived in a rowboat while pregnant with Jakey. Jakey would be born 4 months later, therefore he only receives a significant smaller portion of the Astor estate set aside for any potential unborn heir. Since financial matters are fairly hidden, much guessing occurs in the press. There is endless speculation surrounding Jakey's estate. Will it be $3 million, possibly $10 million? In other words, anywhere from $72.6 to $242 million in 2024. It might have risen considerably over the years or have been decimated by the 1929 Wall Street crash. Many originally thought Jakey might inherit the equivalent of Vincent's nearly $67 million in 1912. In 2024, that would make about $2.1 billion, or at least get a portion divided from that. But alas, Vincent never approved of Madeline nor Jakey. However, together Vincent and Madeline have managed the trust well, surely increasing it in size. Madeline would fight for her son's fortune, but not so much for herself. She gave up most of her widow's inheritance by 1916 to marry her childhood sweetheart, William Dick, whom she was just divorced this summer in Reno. Only now Jakey is so scandalized by his mother's flagrant relationship with the young Italian boxer Enzo Fiormonte that Jakey refuses to talk with Madeline. Instead, Jakey has gone to his mother's older sister, Catherine Emmons Force Spencer, to have his estate settled. Vincent gathers there as well to sign the papers. But once and for all, no matter the final amount, it will all be Jakey's, no longer needing consent from either Vincent or Madeline. Vincent, too, is more than willing to be rid of the nuisance, though his wife, Helen Dinsmore Astor, previously attempted to get them to adopt Jakey as their heir to no luck. Neither Vincent nor Jakey considered that a feasible option. It's been hard watching Vincent live in absolute luxury. All the Astor properties in Manhattan, Beechwood in Newport, and the luxury yacht Nirmahal automatically went to him. Jakey pretty much only has the illustrious eponymous name of their original wealthy ancestor as well as their father. Still, a small fortune is better than no fortune, and independence can be, oh, so delicious. After the signing, Jakey returns to Newport, Rhode Island in celebration of his actual upcoming birthday. With his fortune, Jakey is determined to restore the Astor name in high society, much like his grandmother, the esteemed Gilded Age Queen Bee, Caroline Astor, would have wanted, and Vincent himself abhors. Instead of staying at Beechwood, as Jakey had been forced to visit over the years to continue somewhat relations with Vincent, Jakey will again join his maternal Aunt Catherine at her husband Lorillard Spencer's cottage, Chase de Leu. Already back on July 30th, Jakey held a dinner for 50 at Chase de Leu, then took his guests dancing at the Muenchinger-King Hotel, his future society king role well on its way. Now the press awaits for the potential forthcoming details of what should be the biggest bash during tennis week. Only Jakey is not the only focus of the press. After serious recent kidnapping threats, the tall but no longer awkward heiress Doris Duke has temporarily left her Rough Point cottage for New York. Doris, too, will turn 21 later in November this year, as well as another heiress, the fashionista and rapidly slimming down Barbara Hutton, who remains on her European honeymoon with her no longer impoverished Russian prince, Alexis Mdivani, who himself is the ex-husband to Jakey's cousin Louise Van Alen, whose whereabouts are constantly being tracked in the press. Doris and Louise's ongoing singlehood have them mentioned constantly with Jakey, along with another upcoming heir, Alfred Gwynn Vanderbilt Jr., who shall turn 21 this upcoming September. Oh yes, even with increased security concerns, all four of these lucky, maybe unlucky depending on the angle, single heirs and heiresses have their faces and speculated fortune amounts splashed in newspapers across the nation and even around the world. In particular, the two lads, Jakey and Alfred, are intertwined in all the press mentions. Their mutual age, fortunes, and tragedies make them a fascinating read. Both are also described as rather sullen and morose, which is often attributed to the loss of their eponymous fathers at such young ages. Before his birth, Jakey lost Jack when the iceberg scraped the Titanic, while a couple years later, Alfred, at barely age 3, loses his father, Alfred Vanderbilt, when a torpedo sinks the Lusitania during World War I. While Barbara and Doris share the moniker Gold Dust Twins, Jakey and Alfred are labeled sea victims, marked by Iceberg and Torpedo. It might not be too bad to share some of the limelight. However, other comparisons may be a little more irritating, especially as the press speculate that Alfred shall outshine Jakey more brilliantly with a fairly sizable inheritance. A Vanderbilt trust set up for Alfred and his brother George Vanderbilt is estimated that when evenly split in half will possibly be $17 million each. That's $411 million in 2024, almost twice as much, if not far more, than Jakey's. Currently, Alfred is also a little better at evading press scrutiny in the romantic department. Alfred is skipping most of Newport's tennis week to focus on the horse racing in Saratoga with his widowed aunt Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney. He will likely make his way to Newport. Alfred, too, is grandson to dowager widow and another Gilded Age Society queen bee, Alice Vanderbilt of the Breakers, which he now shares with her daughter and his aunt Countess Gladys Vanderbilt Szechenyi. Thus, Alfred is also related to Uncle Neily Vanderbilt and Aunt Grace Wilson Vanderbilt. Saturday, August 12, 1933, Newport, Rhode Island. At Beechmound Cottage, a dinner and dancing party is given by newcomer Mrs. Marguerite Skirvin Adams to honor Tucky French and Betty Morris. For the debutante party, juniors from Newport, Bar Harbor, Narragansett, and Southampton are invited. Japanese lanterns and colored lights hang from oak boughs and shrubbery on the supper room terrace, where a small group of young guests gather for dinner and are joined by later guests expanding to 300 for dancing while the Meyer Davis Orchestra plays in the ballroom. Mrs. Adams recently purchased Beechmound from the Thaw estate, ending the rentals such as done in prior summers by Barbara Hutton's father, Franklyn Hutton. The divorced Mrs. Adams joins her widowed sister, Mrs. George Mesta, born Pearl Reed Skirvin, who since 1929 has had her own Newport cottage, Midcliff, along Cliffs Walk, near Rough Point and Sea Verge. Over the years, both sisters have entertained as popular hostesses in Washington, D.C. Their father made millions in Oklahoma oil, and Pearl later married and then was widowed as the sole heir of a steel magnate. A former silver screen actress, Mrs. Adams probably could teach lessons on joining the social register. She plans on hostessing several parties and luncheons, all well attended and proving that she has been readily accepted into capitalist society so far. This weekend not only is the debutante party, but Friday the night before, Mrs. Adams hosted a post-bridal party for the Catherine Howard and Charles Townsend wedding. Monday, August 14, 1933. When the date finally arrives, still no birthday preparations are noted. In fact, there will be no birthday celebration at all. From Chase DeLue, Aunt Catherine informs the press that Jakey is no longer even in Newport and will not reveal to where he disappeared, only noting that it is a better precautionary measure from any current potentially dangerous situation. Yes, dangerous regarding his fortune, his life, and quite possibly his heart. One of the most foreboding press comments and speculation on Jakey's birthday. What he's going to do with his life remains to be written into the story. The important fact of his today is his background. From the transcript telegram from Mount Holyoke, Massachusetts. Now it remains to be seen among the bevy of beauties mentioned who will become the future young Mrs. Astor. Section 2, History and Historiography. What is in a name? It seems like something simple, defining, specific, and yet it can come as confusing and frankly non-specific and a challenge. As anyone obsessed with names can see through census charts the rise in popularity of certain names over the years. I love Behind the Name website for both first name and surname descriptions. But the evolution of names, both proper and surnames, have always been primarily to note family and potentially location of origin to distinguish from all the other similarly and or aptly named monikers. And this is further exacerbated in families with money or power as repeated names are bestowed for those wishing or ensuring favoritism in inheritance or other privileges. It might seem hard to keep straight today people from a past with even more generations afterwards, but it seems to be problematic even for those back then. Biggest case in point, John Jacob Astor VI, aka Jakey. The press constantly refers to him as the third. However, his father, Titanic casualty, is John Jacob Astor IV, who also went by Jack and Colonel. Jakey too went by Jack, but earlier in his life also went by Jakey. Due to his youthful period in our story, and to keep straight from his father, I chose Jakey. They have a cousin in London who is actually the fifth and also goes by Jakey with an IE. In one 1933 birthday article, that Jakey's sister-in-law is dubbed the flashiest Astor, as in Lady Nancy Astor, the first female to serve in Parliament from 1919 to 1945. The same article places Nancy amongst her American in-law cousins and also notes that Vincent Astor at 42 is twice the age of his brother, Jakey, at 21. Now that above is just lineage. Then there are the names that come up frequently without familial ties. Frank or Franklyn, as in Frank Shields, Franklyn Hutton, and now Francis or Montfrench, aka Frankie. But that isn't nearly as complicated or confusing as it is with the name Jimmy, being the most prevalent, where there could be easily at least 6 in our series. And when they show up or referenced within the same episode, it gets even messier. Hence, the biggest in plots gets the actual name, who is James Jimmy H.R. Cromwell, due to his association with Doris Duke. And others, when lucky, get their alternative nickname, as in Jean for James Jimmy Donahue, Barbara's flamboyant and gay companion yet cousin. Sometimes another alternative is needed, possibly a middle name, as in for James Jimmy Henry Van Allen, who has become more prevalent than when I originally conceived the story. Each James/Jimmy has a large enough storyline to merit inclusion, but the need for clarity persists. Luckily, I learned long ago how to tell stories about people others never met with repetitive details to keep continuity. In those early cases from my school years, it was often with foreign names, while my best friend went to a separate school and never met my classmates. In reverse, I had to mentally keep track of the people in her other world. For this podcast, the names are far more similar, so that makes it even harder to prevent blending. This reminds me of studying Byzantine history after Arabic history. The latter had endless small names strung together, similar, different, and unfamiliar, with al, ibn, bint, which, by the way, are actually variants of son of and of from. In preparation for tests and exams, I would make up naming conventions to keep them straight. The names were often foreign and unfamiliar and at times exhausting. Then I finally get to Byzantine history with the much simpler John and Michael, which felt easier until there came 9 Michaels and 8 John Paleologos in almost a row and with very, very short reigns. Oh, and they even had monikers and epithets, the best being John the Climax and John the Impotent. Yeah, not really wanting to classify our characters in such a manner, thus I stick with easier and repeating descriptions to situate and remind the connections. Yeah, it's a lot of work, and friends and family often wonder how I keep everyone straight. Lots and lots and lots of ongoing practice. Due to the heavy factual story of the last few episodes, I'm trying to keep the other sections smaller, but for history buffs, especially for this era and people, there are a few associations I cannot overlook within this episode. Mrs. Skirvin Adams met her first husband, his second marriage, Robert Adams, via a New York dinner party in 1919 hosted by Marjorie Merriweather Post and in near future, Hutton. The Adams divorced in 1931, which explains why the news articles on Beachmound leave any mention of him out. Another side note, Roger Adams' first wife, Jenny Marston, marries in 1932 her third husband, opera singer Lawrence Tibbett, who regularly appears in our tales mostly in relation to Cobina Wright. By the way, Beachmound is originally built in 1897 by Benjamin Thaw Sr. His half-brother, the mentally unstable Harry Thaw, will shoot and kill famed architect Stanford White on the rooftop of Madison Square Garden in 1906 after learning Stanford had earlier abused Harry's new wife, actress Evelyn Nesbit. That is a whole large sordid sex scandal, and a good forewarning that marrying into wealth isn't always as pleasant as one might hope. Tiny details thrown out here or there. One never knows what becomes larger later in our carefully interwoven tales. Section 3, Contemporary and Personal Relevance. The pressure of big days happen as big dreams meet reality, when expectations are either fulfilled or fallen soon thereafter. Whether a birthday, a work project deadline, a social engagement, or some other distinct mark, these are dates that come and go in which we hope that somehow our lives will then make a major leap forward. And when it doesn't, then what? Maybe we had set certain goals that don't get achieved, or the whatever does happen doesn't carry the same elation as anticipated. They say planning a vacation is usually the most pleasant part of the actual experience. Right now, I think most of us are waiting for this year 2024 to end and hopefully get positive stability as things feel to be perpetually out of control. That a larger world scheme is occurring much like what was happening during the Great Depression. The situation, like our current circumstances, has gone on long enough to understand reversal is not immediately around the corner and worry that this is the new norm. Recently, I myself have hit a few relatively important date markers, personal, private, and professional, and not quite satisfied with the immediate outcomes or benchmarks not achieved, but still feel positive because I see the direction and path more clearly to where I want to go. It might be harder and more challenging than anticipated, but then again, I never like things all that simple. This might be optimistic self-delusion, but oh well, it helps me push forward when I might otherwise drown in apathy or bitterness, something I am refusing to get sucked into. I can't waste my life that way. I have always had a cardinal magnetic pull that forces me in a certain direction. While it may not be exactly how I originally planned or dreamed, I feel exhilarated that I'm on this journey. The struggles, the doubts, the setbacks, well, it's part of the process too. I'm going to try and make a few shorter episodes and will hopefully catch up and get back to the rhythm I prefer. Despite several setbacks in technical and personal matters, I have crossed the point in the story where I feel a strong momentum towards the story's ultimate resolution. I want to thank all who joined me on this journey and discovery, and I hope you will travel with me further to the end. Our heirs and heiresses have plenty more twists and turns in the battles between love and fortune. They're back! My 2 webinars on the original first 2 Waldorf Astoria hotels. Come explore the family dispute that led to the creation of the original hotel and how the second hotel evolves with the times. Both cover events and people with a ton of photos documenting and verifying the stories told. Come check out Part 1 on Friday, November 1st, 2024, and Part 2 on Friday, November 8th, 2024, both at 5:30 p.m. Eastern and 2:30 p.m. Pacific. $12 each, live with access 1 week afterwards, available via New York Adventure Club, www.nyadventureclub.com. Links also posted via the news and events section at asthemoneyburns.com and all social media. Links available in the notes and transcript sections. If you enjoy As the Money Burns, then please share, like, and subscribe. Next, when we return to As the Money Burns. As tennis week ends, the real competition is over the 3 best finale parties, with one hostess playing with all her might. Until then. As the Money Burns is an original podcast written, produced, and voiced by Nikki Woodard based on historical research. Archival music has been provided by Past Perfect Vintage Music. Check out their website at www.pastperfect.com. Please come visit us at As the Money Burns via GoodPods X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, now Mado, or Instagram. Transcripts, timeline, episode guide, and character bios are available at asthemoneyburns.com.